This week on ACT Desi, it's a special show because we have someone who is an academic, anthropologist, researcher, and so much more. But we will delve deeper into that aspect of his personality through this show on ACT Desi. And you are listening to me on 2XX FM 98.3 People Power Radio. Namaste, salam, sat sri akal, vanakkam, kem cho? कि हम बात करने वाले हैं आज एक ऐसी पर्सनालिटी से who is managing this big event which is happening. It's kind of a multicultural event, but it's very concise in the sense that so much happening over so little amount of time. And then, if I'm not wrong, there are around 50 events that are happening spread between 9th of September to 23rd of September. It's happening at the ANU and it's happening at the School of Culture, History and Languages. And with me today, we have Professor Matt Tomlinson. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Vikas. Nice to meet you.
Matt is an academic, as I said, anthropologist, researcher, and he has many hats that he wears. And we will talk about it. But there are a lot of interesting things when I was going through, your profile that I was going through, and then I picked up certain things that which will be interesting according to me. And the first thing that I picked up from, which was very obvious, is you've done a lot of work around religion, politics, community, the role of all these things. Interesting thing for me, Matt, if I may ask, and you're free to say no to if you don't want to answer. I see that you come from a non-religious family background, and and then doing all your big research in religion, politics, and and I too believe that they are very polarizing factors in human being life, and they do go hand in hand, as you have said in many of your things. How do you? I mean, it's a delicate balance. So you've spent years studying relationship between religion and society, particularly in Fiji. How do you think, you talked about the wall of separation between church and state can be maintained in a society where religion plays a significant role in political events too?
Yeah, so I grew up in the United States in the 1970s and 1980s, and that phrase, wall of separation between church and state, was something we were all taught in our schools, that this was how the United States ran. But it became really clear to me, even as a child, that people wanted to break this wall down all the time. So in the 1980s, there was this big surge of Christian fundamentalism in American politics, and you still see that going on today. So I was interested in it academically for the role religion plays in politics. But as you point out, my own background, I'm agnostic. I don't think I can answer any of the great theological or philosophical questions of religion. But I'm also not a critic in this sense. I've known many people whose lives have been profoundly enriched and transformed by their religious experiences. So it's not like I'm not looking for a foe or an enemy, one side or the other. But what interests me most is these human relations where people talk to others about religious and spiritual matters, and then how they organize themselves socially around those ideas.
But when you talked about religion and politics and how does it affect people, I mean it affects, I think it affects very much, it's a day-to-day occurrence in our life, anything. And I recently did a show on ACT Desi about the election that is coming up in October, and how during these times there's misinformation, disinformation, and people take sides. In how do you maintain a delicate balance? I mean, I understand people have their own theories, people have their own way of thinking about things. But, religion, I mean, even if you say I am agnostic, people might misconstrue it as something, you're against something. So how does, in your research or in your, lot of own personal experiences with working with people and religion in society, how do you counter this kind of behavior with people when you say if you're not with someone, you are against someone?
Well, that's a great question. And it's so in my field of social anthropology, it comes up all the time. One thing I should mention to make my background clearer in all this is because I've always been interested in religion and politics, but because I studied social anthropology, I really wanted to go to a different part of the world other than where I grew up to look at it. Because obviously, if I want to look at religion and politics, I could have stayed home in New Jersey and learned a lot. But in anthropology, often the impulse is to put yourself in a different social context. So that's when I did my research in Fiji. And as many of your listeners will know, a very large percentage of Fiji's population is of South Asian heritage. And most Indo-Fijians, as they're often called, are Hindus, with some Muslims too, and a very small percentage of Christians. But the very large majority of the indigenous Fijian population is Christian. And so there have been coups and counter coups and many things going on in Fiji since independence in 1970. And this is one thing I wanted to look at, was these relations and these articulations between religion and politics. But again, in anthropology, there's a difference between trying to understand something analytically as a scholar and then taking an activist position. And different scholars and anthropologists will come to different ways of balancing this in their own work. I decided early on that I didn't want to be an activist just because it's not in my nature. I'm very happy working with people, even people with whom I sometimes disagree, in order to understand something in its complexity, hopefully in its depth. Beyond that, I write my works mostly for academic and scholarly audiences, and I don't put myself out there to advocate for one point or another, but many anthropologists do. It's just not something I've ever pursued.
Right. Okay. And I think that's the right way of doing it, making your position clear in the very beginning, because otherwise it becomes so confusing, because as it is, religion and politics are, very polarizing things, and
Yes.
it can go any direction in any, in a very short span of time. एसीटी देसी पे आप फिर से मेरे साथ आ गए हैं और जुड़ गए हैं मेरे साथ मैट टॉमलिंसन फ्रॉम एएनयू एंड वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स रिलीजन पॉलिटिक्स पीपल कम्युनिटी polarizing factors, how do you maintain your balance, and lot of stuff. But before that, continuing from where we left, in the before the break, Matt, you were talking about how your research is basically for academic purpose, not really for advocating and anything else. Tell us about little, fun experiences that you had living, on the Pacific Islands, and your day-to-day life. Just something that you remember.
Well, I can tell you what students love hearing about in the classroom, which is kava drinking. So I don't know if you know what kava is, but it's a shrub, but it's the beverage that you make. It's the drink you make from a shrub. And it's popular in many of the Pacific Islands. And I
Right.
can tell you that in Fiji, if you live in rural Fiji, men and women can drink it every day. Men with more maybe intensity and frequency than women, but women drink too.
Hmm.
And the split that you get sometimes in terms of politics, ethnicity, and religion between indigenous Fijians and Indo-Fijians, forget about it with kava, because both groups are very enthusiastic. In fact, there was a scandalous study that suggested that Indo-Fijians drank the most kava of all.
Right.
But for me as a researcher, it was a bit of a shock, because I'd read about kava drinking, but until I was there living in Fiji, I didn't realize quite how central it was to social life. And in fact, there was no way to do good research without being at kava sessions for several hours a day. And I tell this to my colleagues and they nod and say, yeah, sure, that's what it was all about, research. But I say, yeah, it really was. It's an intensely social drinking session that's kind of the heart of social life in rural Fiji.
Right. So do you enjoy the taste of kava?
I have learned to enjoy it. First timers always describe it as it's dusty and earthy, it's a bit bitter, but as an acquired taste, yes, very much so. But what most people enjoy about it isn't necessarily the taste, it's the camaraderie.
Right. I think it's more about the conversations that are happening over kava that are more important than the kava itself. But you are with me, your own Desi host, Vikas Sharma, and this is ACT Desi on 2XX 98.3 People Powered Radio. ACT देसी पे एक इंटरेस्टिंग कॉन्वर्सेशन चल रही है जिसमें हम बात कर रहे हैं मैट टॉमलिंसन से, जो प्रोफेसर हैं एएनयू में, एंड वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट अ फेस्टिवल व्हिच इज गोइंग टू कम इन सितंबर फ्रॉम 9th of September to 23rd of September, जिसमें 50 से ज़्यादा इवेंट हो रहे हैं. 50+ इवेंट्स आर हैपनिंग फ्रॉम exercise to dance to food to culture to history to singing, and I can keep talking about 50 things, but I don't have time for that. You can look at Immersia's website, or you can go to my own website, which is content-artist.com, or my Facebook page, in which I have talked about this festival which is going to come and the two workshops that ACT Desi is hosting with Immersia. But right now we are talking to Matt Tomlinson, and we are talking about a lot of his research things that he've done over so many years, which move around people. And there's, religion, politics, community, camaraderie, drinks, conversations. And the one important thing that I saw in your profile, and you've done an extensive lot of work, and this is like your personal thing, I feel, is spiritualism and mediumship. And when we talk about spiritualism and mediumship, there's always some stereotypes and taboos around it. And it's like, someone sitting with the crystal ball and somebody is, doing all that stuff. But I think it's more about connecting. And as you rightly said, while people are alive and while people are, in another realm itself. So your research on spiritualism and mediumship challenges common misconceptions. Can you share an experience where you saw a spirit medium, successfully building a dialogue between a spirit world and human audience? And what did you learn from it, if anything like that happened at all?
Oh yeah, no, this is a great question. Thank you. Yeah, one of the points I try to make when I tell people I work on spiritualism, I'm studying it academically, and people sometimes assume I have to take this sort of, well, it's obviously true, there's this spiritual reality that we can prove scientifically, or you get the debunkers who say, no, obviously it's all fraudulent or mistaken or whatever. And I say, again, my research isn't about the sort of the bigger existential questions, it's about the social relations. So yeah, so I've spent a lot of time working with the Canberra Spiritualist Association, and they have their regular meetings every fortnight. And it's a wonderful group because what mediums are trying to do is trying to put you in touch with the spirits of your late loved ones, family, friends, and such. And again, lots of Aussies will say right off the bat, well, this is just not possible. Fair enough, people are definitely entitled to their view, but the big stereotype I try to debunk is that this is very marginal, or it's very out of step with the rest of society or humanity, because in almost every society around the world, and for as long as history has been recorded, people have been interested in knowing what happens after we die physically, if there's a way to maintain relations with loved ones who have passed away. Every society asks this question, and of course come up with different answers, different traditional religions, ancestor worship, shamanism, etc. So spiritualism is part of an enormous family. So I've been working with the Canberra Spiritualist Association and enjoying their services very much. And yes, there are brilliant mediums who, all I'll say is they'll astonish you. They will describe your deceased relatives that they've never met with surprising details that sure sound accurate. But this is another stereotype. There are mediums who fail, and I mean this in the politest possible way, but there are mediums who will stand in the service and try to bring through the sensations they're feeling, the impressions they're getting, and nobody in the audience recognizes it as any person that they knew. And so for me, that's part of what makes spiritualism interesting as a religious movement, is it's open to ritual failure in a way other groups often aren't. So if you go to an average Christian service, you might find the sermon boring, but it probably won't fail. You probably won't say, wow, that sermon was a failure, right? It was delivered, whether or not you found it enjoyable. But with spiritualist mediumship, there really is sometimes a hit or miss quality to it, which makes it kind of exciting.
Right, and it's all about life, right? Ups and downs, wins and losses and stuff. But a little fun question, I think, according to me. I mean, when we talk about another realm and spiritualism, and people talking to someone who's deceased and your loved one in another realm, can they really tell us what's the future holds for us if we connect with them?
So this is probably more detail than you want for a radio interview, but spiritualist mediums make a strong distinction between mediumship and psychic work.
Hmm.
And so psychic work is where you're trying to connect the minds of two living people. And the idea is that psychics tend to give predictions about the future, but true hardcore spiritualists look down on that and say that's not what real mediumship is. Your late loved ones are not making predictions about your future.
Right. Okay. So quick tip for listeners of ACT Desi, psychicship and mediumship is very different thing. And if you want to learn more about it, you need to tell me so that I can grab hold of Matt again and we can talk in detail about these two things.
Or
Okay.
I'm sorry to break in, but I can tell you my book on this has just been published and it's open access. So it's a
Right.
book you can read for free.
And
Um,
and what's the title of the book and where can we find it so that if people are listening to this show or watching you can go directly and access it?
if the title is Speaking with the Dead, and if you just type that in and my name, then it should come up right away. It's from a publisher in the US called Punctum, and it's just free. Just click, download it as a PDF, and there it is.
All right, if you like talking to the dead and if you want to understand about how the mediumship works, you need to read this book from Matt, and you can just search, as he said, put it in Google, put it name around it, and then you will find that book, and it's free to access, and you just go ahead, and I'm going to do that myself. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank
Well,
you.
now this is the part when we are jumping into the actual thing that we've been talking about since the beginning of the show, Immersia. And Immersia is like a cultural, potpourri of a lot of things happening in the Pacific and how do you call it, Asia and the Pacific, or the Pacific and the Asia? How do you work
You you could say either. Usually we say Asia and the Pacific.
Asia and the Pacific? Right. So, Australia is a multicultural country, and as someone who, like yourself, who has lived in Australia for, I guess, around 15 years plus, how
Yes.
do you think multiculturalism has shaped the country's social fabric, and what challenges do you see in promoting multiculturalism in an increasingly diverse society?
Yeah, that's another big question. I mean, for me, coming to Australia from the US, everyone has been very warm. Everyone has been very welcoming. It's a very optimistic society, very open society. So I think Australia is a great place for multiculturalism to thrive and to flourish. But I think the challenge is always is just how do I say this? It's just lack of knowledge. People just aren't exposed enough to the way other people think. So there's often enormous goodwill and an interest in how other people are what they're doing and what they're thinking, but there's often not enough knowledge or sort of actual close social articulations with people. So Immersia is meant to really showcase stuff and let people know, hey, these are the arts, these are the crafts, these are the games, these are the sort of ideas that are coming from Asia and the Pacific, but they're best expressed here in Australia, where Asia and the Pacific meet.
I always feel this challenge of how do you promote it amply, because there's so many good things that are happening. Like, for example, Immersia as well, and we are trying our best to promote it. But I have realized this. I don't know about it. Is it very related to Canberra itself? But it's very hard to get a lot of diverse people to sample the other diversity, which they are not really aware of. People end up coming to something that they already know, and they are very limited in their head by the choice that they have to make as a festival, wherein you want to see someone, what Mongolian gear is about, what Tai Chi is all about, what yoga is about, and someone who doesn't really know about yoga, for example. What are the challenges, and how do you think, like, if you have to just look at this challenge that I'm talking about, promotion of people so that people know more about something which they don't really know about, what is that one thing that you think you'll do differently in today's world to promote and support your festival?
Thanks. So the one thing that's important to mention up front is that everything is free. So we ask people to register for events. So if you go to the Immersia website,
Yeah.
you'll see everything and you're asked to register, but everything is free. Everything is completely free. But you're right, people will tend to gravitate to the things they already know. So I think the most important thing for me has been to realize that Immersia is going to be an ongoing project for many years. So this is the third year that we're running it. And each year we're sort of tweaking it a bit and seeing what's popular and what seems to attract the most interest from people. And it's just, it's an ongoing project. So this year we'll see what works especially well or what could be improved for the future. But we've already learned lessons from the past 2 years. So we're confident that this year is pretty good, pretty appealing. And we do try to make it as diverse as possible. We really do try to cover lots of regions from Asia and the Pacific.
But can I ask you, what are you excited about in the program this year?
Oh, everything. There's so much because if you just want to sort of relax and not sort of chill out, there we have we have photo exhibits. We've got a couple of film screenings. If you really want to immerse yourself, we have hands-on workshops, things like calligraphy and both Korean calligraphy and Mongolian calligraphy. We've got food making workshops, henna workshops, yoga. So it depends on how active you're feeling. I'm kind of excited for it all, but it's hard to pick one thing. I can't pick one thing, but I will say this. I'll tell you one thing that's new this year. So every year we construct a Mongolian ger. It's the traditional Mongolian sort of tent-like house.
Yeah.
We have one. The CHL has one, but it takes a bit of care and to store it properly, and it takes a bit of time and expense to reassemble it properly every year. So every year we reassemble the ger, and it's here outside the Coombs building on the ANU campus. And we're proud of it and we love it. And it's visually attractive and it's fun to go inside. But this is the first year we're really trying to make it a hub for many different events. So a good number of events are actually taking place in or next to the ger this time. So it's not just an attraction on its own, it's also a focal point for many of the events.
Right, and as ACT Desi is working along with Immersia, and then we are doing two workshops. Uh, uh,
Can you
have you had a chance to register for those workshops? Because I want to see you in both of them.
you will see me in both, but can I ask if you would be willing to speak about them because you are the expert leading those workshops?
Every year, like since last year when we started doing these workshops, my agenda has always been to talk about the diversity that India holds. But I talked about the Bhangra and what's the origin of it. Why do we do it? What comes out of it? Why do we do it? Which part of, it was from Punjab, and it's a celebratory dance. And similarly, the other one was henna, and henna is like so much culture, hidden in it because it's just not India. It's just the pollination of the empires that moved around, and then from Egypt, where the first mummy was found many thousand years ago. The first, I got to know a lot of things about these because I was doing research to talk about it. But similarly, I wanted to just share those information with people. And this year, we are focusing two different parts of India as well. So one is the southernmost part, which is Tamil Nadu, or Chennai as we know it right now. We have a martial art form which is probably 4,000 years old, and it's called Silambam, and there are two young proponents of this martial art form in Canberra. They are practicing, and I interviewed them like 3 4 weeks ago, and because I came to know that they know this art form and they performed it in multicultural festival. So this is like an art form which has more than 70 weapons that you can use, but it's also about how you can do self defense. The art form originated with the need of self defense. So we talk about that. We will have a little self defense kind of couple of moves that people can learn, and then at the end of it there will be these two young kids, Aishwarya and Anant. They will be performing the martial art form with two bamboo sticks, to showcase the various things that they can do and they have learned. The other one is the western part of India. It's from Gujarat, and where there's a dance form, a folk dance form called Garba, and it's a religious dance form which has been it's very elaborate dance form. It happens for 9 days during the religious festival that is actually happening around Diwali, which is another festival people are aware about. So before Diwali, there's like 9 days of festivities that these group dance happens. So we'll talk more about these two workshops. And as you said, you wanted to hear a little bit more about this. I just
Yeah.
want to share it with you, and I hope that you will be part of these two workshops with us.
Yes, I'm looking forward to them.
If we don't talk about this, it will be very unfair because we've talked about this festival which is happening for the past. This is, I think, the third year,
Yes.
and right, this is the third year, right? And we are doing like around 50 events. So I'm really interested to know what the kind of team that you have who's running this across, just 2 weeks, and you must have like 5 6 7 or 10 people working on these 50 events.
We have many people working on this, many volunteers, but I want to give very special mention to Gauri Banerjee, who is our who works in CHL and is the leader, the ship's captain for Immersia, and does such a brilliant job every year. What she does so well is not only approaching the right people to do the right events, but really getting community engagement. Guri has worked absolutely tirelessly for Immersia for all 3 years, and I'm already planning to have conversations with her about next year. So huge thanks to Guri, but she's also doing it with a team of many other staff members in CHL and also many volunteers, including our students.
All right, and thanks to Gauri for organizing this interview for us. That's one of the another thing that she's done for
Yes.
Immersia, and working with me, helping and supporting me in setting up these events. And I really agree with what you said, Matt, about she worked tirelessly and just taking this Immersia every year with all those constraints that we have. We know. Yeah, any last words before, just promotion of the Immersia before we leave?
Yeah, thank you. No, I hope to see many, many members of the Canberra community at Immersia. Everyone's invited. The events are free, but please do look at the website so you can see the range of the program and to register for individual events.
All right. I usually do this with all my multicultural guests. I'll do it with you as well. So there's a tagline that goes with my show. It's called "Stay calm and act desi."
Thank you.
So
I
you
will
have to
stay
so
calm
you
and
have
act.
to say that.
I will stay calm and act desi. Thank you.
That's the best way I have ever heard. Thank you so much, Matt, for your time, and Gauri for organizing this. And till we meet again, stay calm and act desi. Shubhratri, Shabba Khair. Good night. Do listen to this show. I'm just gonna record like a promo. So do listen to this show that is going to come this Friday on ACT Desi. We'll talk about Immersia, and we're going to talk about a lot of events that are happening during Immersia and what can you expect during these days from 9th of September to 23rd of September. So there's a break now, and then the song will come, and then we'll pick this up again.
Yep. Can I ask you, how do you does it pronounce the Indian martial art form? Is it Silambam?
Yes, silambam. So
Yes.
you can break it into two words, silam and bum. Silambam.
And the form of dance, Garba?
Yes, garba.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, he's professor. So pardon me. I said associate professor, but you are a professor. So my mistake.
No, it's only recently though, so it's the website has a hangover. So
All right. So let's just jump back in.